Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another video lesson for you. This is 5.4, the War Expand and Foreign Help. So, as always, please make sure that you are not watching a YouTube video or anything else in the background, that you are paying attention to not only what's being shown on the screen, but also the words coming out of my mouth, and that you are writing your notes as you go along, because a heads up, those might be helpful. So, let's begin for today. So, we've got to back up a little bit. So if you remember the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, France wants revenge from the British Empire. They are heavily in debt, just like the British were, but unlike the British, they didn't win. So they want revenge on the British. And what other better way to do that than to help the American colonists rebel against the British crown? So the problem was King Louis XVI, which is that dapper gentleman in the bottom, like right here, right below my face. And he was waiting for the American colonists to show that they could actually win a major battle. Because you don't want to ever put all that money and all those resources in a side that you know is likely to lose. You at least want to be persuaded. And you got to remember at the same time, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin have been sent over to France to try to get more help and to make this treaty occur. Then the battles of Saratoga occur in September and October of 1777, which is the major turning point of the war. Hint, it is the major turning point of the war. Hint, it is the major turning point of the war, because that is when the American British colonies finally begin to win the battles. And they finally begin to turn the tide. And with a little bit of help from our friends, we are likely to win. So, after Saratoga, France makes an alliance with the British American colonies. He sends funding, he sends troops, and he begins to build up his navy to blockade the eastern Atlantic Ocean, or Atlantic coast in North America, and to prevent the British from using their navy and reinforcing their troops. He also will recognize the United States as an independent nation. And France will be our longest lasting ally even to this day. They actually allied with us before we were even a real nation. So it kind of just tells you how important that relationship between the United States and France is going to be throughout our history. Also, Spain is beginning to be persuaded by France to help. Because Spain, I always like to kind of say, is the kid brother of this time frame for the Europeans. Kind of picking on people when they kind of get the ability to. And everyone dislikes Britain at this time in Europe. Why? Because they're the big boy or big girl on campus, and you always go after those who are likely to be knocked down a peg. It's also how Spain will get Florida back as well. So from there, the Marquis de Lafayette also joins the Americans, and he's a 19-year-old French noble, and he would use his own money to fund his American troops. You got to remember, we had nothing. And he actually takes a lot of his money that he had and begin to clothe his American troops. He gets them muskets, bayonets. He actually buys them shoes. And he begins to use his friendship with King Louis XVI to begin to increase the number of troops being sent. Approximately 6,000 more troops the French are going to help us with. Also, just a little background information, George Washington and Marquis de Lafayette will have a very close relationship. Kind of like Washington's son. Because Washington never had a son, never really had a child. And because of that, he wanted someone that he could give that information to help grow, which would be the young nobleman, Marquis de Lafayette. From there, we have Baron von Stoyben, who is a German from Prussia. Prussia, Prussia, not Russia. Very different. Don't mix those up. And he will be a Prussian military instructor. And during Valley Forge, he will help teach our troops how to march, how to fight in lines, and how to use the bayonet. Sorry about that random jump cut. I had to get a student to stop waving their hands. It was quite distracting. Anyway, as I was speaking and talking about, what kind of makes a Baron von Stoyben kind of interesting is that he's actually kicked out of the Prussian army because he was a homosexual. He liked other men. And he would be, and when Washington allows him to join him, Washington's perspective was very much, hey, I don't care who you love, I don't care where you come from. If you're willing to fight for the cause of liberty and freedom, you can join us. And it makes sense, because you got to remember, Washington understands what his troops need. He understands how the American ideals of diversity are going to be key to our success, not only during this war, but also in our future. So from there, we get to the Winter of Valley Forge, which is December of 1777 to May of 1778. So what happens is Philadelphia has already been captured by the British, and they have set up their winter quarters. And right outside Philadelphia, Washington finds a field, and he begins to build his winter camp. There are very little supplies, almost none. The men are starving. They have no shoes. Literally, the people in the area could tell when the Continental Army was out training, because there were bloody footprints in the snow from the people marching around, because they literally were wrapping like leather or just linen around their feet and marching. And Valley Forge, though some will desert, and about a quarter of the troops will die either from disease or malnutrition, it really shows the backbone of the American spirit. The idea that when things get tough, we don't run away and scream like a whole bunch of babies and freak out. We pull ourselves up from our bootstraps and we push forward, because anything that is anything that is difficult is important and is worth our time and is worth our struggle. Without that struggle, it doesn't mean anything to us. That's what makes us Americans. That's what makes us stronger, are those difficulties and struggles. And Valley Forge really cements this in the American mythology and in our history, and will be embedded in our culture. We don't shy away from difficulties. We have a tendency to go right against them and fight head on. And during winter at Valley Forge, this is where Washington's troop will become a formal army and will be able to fight against the British one-on-one. Meanwhile, on the frontier, the area that the Proclamation of 1763 was not allowing Americans to, the American British colonists to travel to, there was, of course, fighting going on. So one of them was a gentleman known as George Rogers Clark, who was actually one of my ancestors. And he was best known for his guerrilla tactics and use of deception in battle. So what he would do is he would use his small forces to attack all these forts. And because he had so few men, he did things like in the middle of the night, he would dress them up in different gear, some as Native Americans, some as French soldiers, some as American soldiers, some as Spanish soldiers, some as militiamen. And in the middle of the night, he'd have them ride back and forth in front of the forts, making noise, hooting, hollering, lighting all these bonfires, to really think that his force is much larger than the rest of the forces were in the area. And because of this, he was able to trick multiple forts on the western frontier to just surrendering. And they open up the front of the fort, and here walks in like 50 men, taking a fort of over 500 to 1,000. And the British we keep getting tricked. And that's one of the things we got to understand about how the Americans fight during this time. We fight to win. We're not fighting to look fancy or be honorable. We're fighting to win this war because we know that our honor, our livelihood, and our property and freedoms are on the line. It is more important to protect our citizens, our families back home, and to restore our ability to govern ourselves. Meanwhile, we're also having battles on the ocean. So Britain, of course, would have control of the seas. They're the largest navy in the world at this time. So the Americans decided to begin to use privateers, aka pirates that are hired by a government to do a job. And they would use these privateers to constantly attack the British merchant ships. Because you have to remember, they're the big boy or big girl on the world stage. They're the ones that are traveling all around the world, beginning to trade, and they are controlling the oceans. So though we have a very small navy, about 6 ships, not much at all, we were able to use these privateers to capture multiple vessels, like this guy right here, John Paul Jones. Sorry again for the random jump cut, but anyway, John Paul Jones, not the bassist from Led Zeppelin, is an American naval officer, and he constantly attacked vessels around the British Isles. And he had small little schooners. He didn't have a large ship of the line or a large frigate. He had these little tiny vessels. He's best well known for taking the HMS Serapis. And what he will do is he actually does kind of a gangster move. So what's happening is he's attacking the Serapis, and the Serapis is winning. And his vessel is sinking and is about to go to the bottom. And the British vessel asks, "Hey, are you done fighting?" And John Paul Jones does one of the most famous quips in naval warfare: "I have not yet begun to fight." And what he does is his naval officers take these hooks, more or less grappling hooks, and they hook them onto the side of the Serapis, and they drag their still burning vessel towards this naval vessel. And then they jump onto the Serapis, kill all the British officers on board, and takes that large vessel for their own. And he will use the Serapis to constantly attack other vessels around the British Isles. And what's kind of amazing about this is that he was able to do this without any real training and with the use of grappling hooks and muskets, not his vessel itself. Pretty cool guy. He's really neat. So from there, that's it. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.